The fluorescent lights in Romano's Italian restaurant had been flickering for 3 weeks, casting shadows that made the red vinyl booths look like they were breathing. Elena Vasquez had learned to ignore it. Same way she'd learned to ignore the ache in her feet after a double shift, the way her lower back screamed by hour 10, and the hollow feeling in her stomach when she calculated her tips and knew they still wouldn't be enough. 27 years old, and she felt 50. That's what happened when life kept taking and you kept giving until there was nothing left but muscle memory and stubborn hope. She wiped down table 6 for the 3rd time, even though it was already clean. Staying busy kept her mind from wandering to places it shouldn't go, like the hospital bill sitting on her kitchen counter. $12,000 for her mother's emergency surgery last month. The insurance had covered some, but some still left a mountain of debt that grew taller every day with interest that felt personally vindictive. "Elena, booth 12 needs water," called Marco from behind the bar. "If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you." He was 63, had owned Romano's for 40 years, and treated his staff like family, which meant he paid them barely enough to survive but genuinely cared when they struggled. On it. She grabbed a pitcher, tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, and headed toward booth 12. The Wednesday dinner shift was always slow. Locals who knew Romano's wasn't fancy, but the food was honest. Red sauce that had been made the same way since 1978. Meatballs the size of baseballs. Bread so fresh you could smell the yeast from the street. Elena had been working here for 2 years, ever since her mother's diabetes had gotten worse and someone needed to be close by during the day. Her degree in graphic design sat in a drawer at home, expensive paper that meant nothing when real life demanded cash, not credentials. She poured water for the elderly couple at booth 12, Mrs. Chen and her husband, who came every Wednesday, and ordered the same thing. Chicken parmigiana for her, spaghetti carbonara for him, and they always split a tiramisu. "How's your mother, dear?" Mrs. Chen asked, her accent thick with decades of life lived between languages. "She's doing better, thank you." Elena smiled, the practiced smile that hid the truth. Her mother was stable, but stability came with a price tag that included medications, physical therapy, and the constant fear that one more emergency would bury them completely. "You're a good daughter," Mr. Chen said, squeezing his wife's hand. They'd been married 52 years. Elena saw the way they looked at each other and wondered if she'd ever have that. Love that lasted through decades, through struggle, through the grinding weight of simply existing. Probably not. Her last relationship had ended 8 months ago when David, her boyfriend of 2 years, had decided that dating someone who worked 2 jobs and couldn't afford to go out anymore wasn't exciting enough. He'd wanted adventures. She'd needed groceries. "Anything else I can get you?" Elena asked. "We're perfect, sweetheart." She moved through her section, refilling drinks, clearing plates, smiling until her face hurt. The dinner rush, such as it was, came and went. A few families, some college students sharing a pizza, a businessman eating alone while typing on his laptop. By 8:30, the restaurant had emptied to just 4 tables. Elena calculated her tips. $73. Add that to her morning shift at the coffee shop, another $45. $118 today, times 5 days a week. $590 weekly, minus rent at $1,400 monthly, utilities at $200, groceries, her mother's prescriptions, the payment plan with the hospital. The math never worked. Every month she fell further behind, juggling which bill to pay late, which company might be more forgiving. She'd become an expert in apologetic phone calls and promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "Elena, table 9. Marco's voice pulled her from her thoughts. She looked toward booth 9 and felt something shift in the air. The kind of shift that happens when someone dangerous walks into a room, and everyone pretends not to notice while simultaneously becoming hyper-aware of every exit. 4 men sat in the corner booth. 3 of them had the unmistakable look of bodyguards, alert eyes, expensive suits that didn't quite hide the bulge of shoulder holsters, positioned to watch the door in the kitchen. But it was the 4th man who made Elena's breath catch. Dante Moretti sat with his back to the brick wall, a position that screamed calculated caution. Early 30s, dark hair cut precisely, a jawline that could have been carved from marble, and eyes so dark they looked black in the dim lighting. His suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a watch that caught the light like trapped stars. She'd seen him before, of course. Everyone in this neighborhood knew Dante Moretti, even if they pretended they didn't. His family owned half the businesses on this street. the legitimate ones and the ones that operated in shadows. He'd taken over the organization 5 years ago when his father died, allegedly of a heart attack, though rumors suggested the heart attack had been delivered via 2 bullets to the chest. Elena approached the table, menu in hand, trying to ignore the way her pulse had quickened. Fear, she told herself. Just fear. Nothing else. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Romano's. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Can I start you with something to drink? Dante looked up from his phone, and for a moment, their eyes met. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered there. Curiosity, maybe, or assessment, like he was cataloging her face, her uniform, her worn shoes, filing away information for some purpose she couldn't guess. Water for the table, he said. His voice was smooth, educated, with just a trace of the neighborhood accent underneath. And give us a few minutes with the menu. Of course. She poured water, hyper-aware of the silence at the table, the way the 3 bodyguards watched her without appearing to watch her at all. As she turned to leave, Dante spoke again. What's good here? Elena paused. Most customers who looked like him didn't actually want her opinion. They asked out of politeness, then ordered what they'd already decided on. But something in his tone suggested he was genuinely asking. The osso buco is incredible, she said. Marco, the owner, slow cooks it for 6 hours. It falls off the bone, and if you want pasta, the cacio e pepe is simple but perfect. Just cheese, pepper, and pasta, but somehow it's better than places that charge 3 times as much. You've tried everything on the menu? One of the bodyguards asked, smirking slightly. Like the idea of a waitress actually eating the food she served was amusing. Most of it, Elena said evenly. Marco lets staff eat family meal before shifts. He believes you can't recommend something you haven't tasted. Dante's eyes hadn't left her face. The osso buco, then. And a bottle of the Barolo, if Marco has one in back that he's not telling tourists about. Elena felt her eyebrows raise slightly. The Barolo was expensive, and Marco only mentioned it to customers he trusted knew wine. I'll check with him. She walked back to the bar, feeling Dante's gaze follow her until she turned the corner. Marco was polishing wine glasses, his routine when the night wound down. Table 9 wants the osso buco, she said quietly. And they're asking about the Barolo. Marco's expression shifted, something between respect and wariness. He knows his wine, then. You know who that is? Everyone knows who that is, Elena. Marco's voice dropped lower. Dante Moretti. His grandfather opened the bakery, 2 doors down in 1943. His father expanded the family business. Now Dante runs everything from construction to waste management to God knows what else. So we serve him and stay out of his way. Exactly. Marco pulled a dusty bottle from the locked cabinet, under the register. This is the 98. Tell him it's on the house. A gesture of respect from one neighborhood family to another. Elena understood. This wasn't generosity. This was the tax that small businesses paid to stay safe. Protection disguised as hospitality. She brought the wine to the table, showed Dante the label. Marco insists this is his gift. A welcome to longtime friends of the neighborhood. Dante studied the bottle, then looked at Elena with an expression she couldn't read. Tell Marco I appreciate the gesture, but I'll pay for it. I'm here as a customer tonight, not as business. It was such an unexpected response that Elena didn't know what to say. Men like him didn't refuse gifts. Refusing implied you didn't need favors, didn't want obligations, or it implied something else, that you were testing something. I'll let him know, she managed. She uncorked the wine, poured a small taste for Dante. He swirled it, inhaled, tasted, nodded approval. She filled the glasses around the table, her hands steady despite the strange energy crackling beneath the surface of this interaction. The rest of the evening proceeded normally. The men ordered food, ate without much conversation, the bodyguards more focused on watching the room than enjoying their meals. Dante ate slowly, methodically, occasionally checking his phone but mostly seeming to simply think, his expression distant. Elena served them without hovering, checked on them twice, refilled water and wine. Professional, invisible, the way good servers learn to be. By 9:45, the restaurant was empty except for table 9. The cook had left. Marco was counting the register. Elena wiped down tables and refilled salt, shakers, killing time until the last customers left so she could finally go home. At 10:15, Dante signaled for the check. Elena printed it from the system. 4 ossobucos, 1 cacio e pepe, 1 bottle of Barolo 98, 2 desserts, $378. She placed the leather portfolio on the table. "No rush," she said. "Whenever you're ready." Dante pulled out a black credit card, the kind Elena had only seen a handful of times. Unlimited credit, the kind of card that marked you as either extremely wealthy or extremely powerful, usually both. She took it to the register, swiped it through the machine, and waited for the approval. The machine beeped. Red light. Declined. Elena stared at the screen, confused. She tried again. Same result. Declined. Her stomach tightened. This was awkward. Embarrassing. How did you tell a man like Dante Moretti that his card had been declined? Men who carried black cards didn't get declined. Unless something was very wrong. She glanced toward the booth. The 3 bodyguards were talking quietly among themselves. Dante was looking at his phone, seemingly relaxed, unaware. Elena took a breath and walked back to the table, the declined card in her hand. She leaned in close, keeping her voice low so the others wouldn't hear. "Sir," she said softly, "your card was declined." Dante looked up, and for a split second, she saw something flash across his face. Not surprise, not embarrassment, something else. Satisfaction, maybe. Like she'd just passed a test she didn't know she was taking. "Declined?" he repeated, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes, sir. It might be a technical issue with the machine, or maybe the bank flagged it for suspicious activity." She was giving him an out, a way to save face. "I can try running it again, or if you have another card." The 3 bodyguards had stopped talking. They were watching now, their attention sharp. Dante reached for his wallet, made a show of checking it, then shook his head. "I seem to have left my other cards at the office. That's the only one I have on me." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Elena didn't fully understand, but could feel pressing against her skin like humidity before a storm. "I can call someone to bring a card," one of the bodyguards offered, pulling out his phone. "No need," Dante said, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. "I'm sure we can work something out. How much is the bill?" $378, Elena said. "And if I can't pay it?" The question hung between them like a blade. Elena's mind raced. What was the right answer here? Call the police? Laugh it off? Marco would probably just comp the meal, take the loss rather than make an issue with Dante Moretti. But something in Dante's expression told her this was important, that her answer mattered in ways she couldn't see yet. "Then you'd owe Romano's $378, Elena said simply, "and I trust you're good for it." Dante's lips curved into the smallest smile. "You trust me?" "You knew about the Barolo," she said. "That means you've been here before, probably grew up in this neighborhood. People from here take care of their debts. So yes, I trust you'll come back and settle up. Even though I'm Dante Moretti?" So he knew she knew. Of course he did. "Especially because you're Dante Moretti," Elena said, meeting his gaze directly. "A man in your position can't afford to skip out on a restaurant bill. It would be bad for your reputation." One of the bodyguards actually laughed, quickly stifled. Dante's smile widened, reaching his eyes this time, transforming his face from intimidating to almost warm. "You're not afraid of me," he observed. "I'm terrified," Elena admitted. "But fear doesn't change the math. You ate the food. Someone has to pay for it. If it can't be now, it'll be later. That's how it works." Dante stood, buttoning his jacket. He was tall, she realized. At least 6 feet, with the kind of presence that made a room feel smaller. The 3 bodyguards stood as well, flanking him. "What's your name?" Dante asked. Elena Vasquez. Elena Vasquez, he repeated, like he was memorizing it. "I'll be back tomorrow night to settle my debt." "And Elena?" "Yes, sir?" "Thank you for your discretion. Not everyone would have handled that with such grace." He walked toward the door, the 3 bodyguards following. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. "The meal was excellent. Please give my compliments to the chef." Then they were gone, disappearing into the night like they'd never been there at all. Elena stood holding the declined credit card, her heart pounding, trying to understand what had just happened. Marco emerged from the back office, his face creased with worry. "What was that about? I saw them leave. Did they pay?" "His card declined," Elena said slowly. "He's coming back tomorrow to settle up." Marco's face went pale. "His card declined?" "Dante Moretti's card declined. And you told him to come back tomorrow? What was I supposed to do?" "Comp the meal! Jesus, Elena, you don't make men like that look bad. You don't put them in a position where they owe you something. But Marco was wrong about one thing. The look on Dante's face hadn't been embarrassment or anger. It had been something else entirely. Like Elena had just done exactly what he'd hoped she would do. Like the declined card hadn't been an accident at all. Like this entire evening had been a test, and somehow, impossibly, she'd passed. Elena locked up Romano's at 10:43, exhausted down to her bones. The F train home would take 35 minutes, plus the 10-minute walk to her apartment building. She'd be in bed by midnight if she was lucky, up again at 5:30, for her coffee shop shift. The night air was cool, tinged with the smell of garbage and distant rain. Brooklyn, in October, caught between seasons, undecided about whether to be beautiful or brutal. Usually it chose both. She walked toward the subway station, her tips tucked securely in her apron pocket. $112 tonight, better than average thanks to a couple who'd been celebrating an anniversary and tipped 40%. Every dollar mattered. Every dollar was already spent before she earned it. Footsteps behind her. Casual but purposeful. Elena's shoulders tensed. This neighborhood was safe enough, but safe enough still meant being aware, being careful, being ready to run if necessary. She picked up her pace slightly, digging in her purse for her keys, threading them between her fingers like she'd been taught. Makeshift weapon if needed. Elena Vasquez. She spun around, heart hammering. A man stood 10 feet away, mid-30s, wearing a dark suit and an expression that was either friendly or predatory. Sometimes the difference was impossible to tell until too late. "Sorry to startle you," he said, holding up both hands in a gesture of peace. "My name is Lorenzo. I work for Mr. Moretti." Elena's grip on her keys tightened. "Okay. He asked me to give you this." Lorenzo held out an envelope, thick and cream-colored, expensive paper. "And to make sure you got home safely. I don't need an escort." "I know," Lorenzo said easily. "But Mr. Moretti insists. So if you could just let me walk 20 feet behind you to the subway station, we can both tell him you were safe, and everyone's happy." Elena wanted to refuse on principle. She didn't need protection from a man she'd served dinner to. She definitely didn't need to be in debt to Dante Moretti in any way. But Lorenzo's expression was patient, and something about the way he stood suggested refusing wouldn't actually stop him from following her anyway. At least this way it was acknowledged instead of creepy. "Fine," she said. 20 feet. Understood. She turned and continued walking, hyper-aware of Lorenzo maintaining his distance behind her. The envelope felt heavy in her hand. Curiosity burned, but she wouldn't open it here on the street where Lorenzo could watch her reaction. The subway station appeared ahead, fluorescent lights harsh against the darkness. Elena descended the stairs, swiped her Metro card, and glanced back. Lorenzo stood at the top of the stairs, nodded once, then disappeared. She'd been dismissed. Protected and dismissed, like she was a package that needed delivering. The train arrived 3 minutes later, half-empty cars filled with exhausted people heading home from jobs that didn't pay enough. Elena found a seat, finally allowed herself to look at the envelope. Inside was cash, $400 bills, and a note, handwritten in precise, elegant script, for the inconvenience tonight. "The meal was worth more than what I couldn't pay. Consider this a down payment on the debt I owe. I'll see you tomorrow. D." Elena stared at the money, her mind racing. $400 when the bill had been $378, so he'd tipped her $22 on a meal he hadn't technically paid for yet. No, that wasn't what this was. This was a message, a statement, a move in a game she was only beginning to understand she was playing. Men like Dante Moretti didn't accidentally leave their credit cards at the office. They didn't carry only one card, and they definitely didn't have cards that declined without warning. He'd tested her. The whole thing had been deliberate. But why? Elena folded the bills carefully and tucked them into her wallet. "Tomorrow," he'd said. He was coming back tomorrow. And despite every rational instinct screaming at her to stay away from men who operated in shadows and tested waitresses for unknown reasons, Elena found herself wondering what would happen when he did. The apartment was dark when she got home, just the glow of the television from her mother's bedroom. Elena unlocked the door quietly, trying not to wake her, but the floor creaked and her mother's voice called out. "Elena? That. You, mija?" "Yeah, mama. It's me." She found her mother propped up in bed, watching some telenovela with the volume low. Maria Vasquez was 53 but looked older, worn down by illness and struggle. Diabetes, high blood pressure, arthritis that made her hands stiff and painful. She'd worked as a seamstress for 30 years until her hands gave out, and now she lived on disability that barely covered her medications. You're late, Maria said, worry creasing her face. I was getting concerned. Just busy night at the restaurant. Elena kissed her mother's forehead. Elena, how are you feeling? Fine, fine. The automatic response that meant everything hurt but she wouldn't complain. Did you eat? I'll make something in a minute. There's leftover arroz con pollo in the fridge. Just needs warming up. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, taking her mother's hand gently. The skin was paper thin, the joints swollen. Mama, we need to talk about your physical therapy. Maria's expression closed. We can't afford it. The doctor said it's important. If you don't keep up with it, your mobility will get worse. And if we pay for it, we don't pay rent. Or we don't buy my medications. There's no magic solution, Elena. We make choices. It was an old argument, circular and exhausting. Elena wanted to scream that her mother deserved better, that someone who'd worked her whole life shouldn't have to choose between medicine and food, between treatment and housing. But screaming didn't change reality. I got good tips tonight, Elena said instead. We'll figure it out. She didn't mention the $400 in her wallet, didn't mention Dante Moretti or declined credit cards or tests she didn't understand. Her mother had enough to worry about without adding mysterious mafia bosses to the list. After her mother fell asleep, Elena made herself a plate of rice and chicken, ate it standing at the kitchen counter while reviewing the pile of bills that never got smaller. Hospital payment plan, $200 monthly, rent, $1,400, utilities, roughly $200, medications, $350 without insurance coverage, food, $400 if they were careful. Her mother's physical therapy, $600 for twice-weekly sessions the doctor insisted were necessary. Total monthly expenses, $3,150. Her income from both jobs, roughly $2,500, sometimes a bit more if tips were good. The math didn't work. Had never worked. She'd been supplementing with credit cards, juggling balances, paying minimums, while interest compounded into a mountain she'd never climb. The $400 from Dante would help, would buy a week of breathing room, maybe 2. But then what? Elena stared at the money, at the note with its elegant handwriting and implied promises. I'll see you tomorrow. What did Dante Moretti want from her? Why test a random waitress? What did passing his test mean? Nothing good, probably. Men like him didn't enter your life and make things better. They complicated, they endangered, they took more than they gave. But God, she was so tired of drowning, so tired of the constant calculation, the relentless pressure, the feeling that one more unexpected expense would finally break her completely. If Dante Moretti wanted to see her tomorrow, she'd be there. She'd serve him his dinner, accept his payment, and maybe, just maybe, she'd ask him what the hell this was really about. Because Elena Vasquez had been powerless her whole life. Poor, tired, trapped by circumstances she couldn't control. But tonight, for just a moment, she'd had power over a man who was used to having all of it. She'd trusted him when she could have humiliated him. She'd given him grace when she could have taken advantage. And somehow, impossibly, that had mattered to him. Tomorrow she'd find out why. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of declined credit cards and dark eyes that saw too much, and the unsettling feeling that her life had just changed direction without her permission. The kind of change that felt like falling, where you didn't know if someone would catch you or if you'd just hit the ground harder for hoping. Elena's morning shift at Brewhaven started at 6 a.m., which meant leaving the apartment at 5:30, while Brooklyn was still dark and quiet. She'd slept maybe 4 hours, her mind too busy processing everything that had happened at Romano's. The coffee shop was in Williamsburg, a 20-minute train ride followed by a 10-minute walk through streets that smelled like fresh bread from the bakeries opening early. Brewhaven catered to the morning rush of professionals, artists, and students who needed caffeine before facing another day in a city that never stopped demanding more. "You look like hell," said Kristen, the other opening barista, when Elena walked in. Kristen was 22, art school dropout, with purple hair and a nose ring that their manager pretended not to see. Didn't sleep well. Man trouble? Elena almost laughed. Was Dante Moretti man trouble? That seemed like calling a hurricane weather inconvenience. Something like that. They went through the opening routine. Brew espresso machines, stock cups and lids, arrange the pastries delivered from the bakery down the block, flip the sign to open. By 6:15, the first customers were streaming in, and Elena fell into the rhythm of taking orders, making drinks, smiling through exhaustion. Grande latte, extra hot, venti cold brew, no ice, medium cappuccino, oat milk, extra foam, the language of coffee orders, specific and demanding, a liturgy of caffeine addiction. At 7:45, during a brief lull between rushes, Elena's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Good morning, Elena. I hope you slept well. I'll see you at Romano's tonight at 7 p.m. Please make sure you're working. D.M. Her pulse quickened. How did he get her number? Then she remembered Lorenzo, the bodyguard who'd walked her to the subway. He'd have resources. Finding a phone number would be trivial for someone in Dante's organization. She typed back, I work tonight anyway. You don't need to tell me to show up to my own job. His response came immediately. Good. I admire your work ethic. Wear something nice under your uniform. We're going somewhere after your shift. Elena stared at the phone. The presumption was breathtaking, like her time was his to command, like she'd just agreed to go somewhere with a man she barely knew, a dangerous man who'd tested her for reasons she still didn't understand. She typed, I don't think so. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, please, I'd like to explain last night. You deserve answers. I promise you'll be safe. The please surprised her. Men like Dante Moretti didn't say please. They commanded, expected obedience, took what they wanted. 1 hour. After my shift. Somewhere public. Agreed. I'll pick you up at Romano's at 10 p.m. Elena pocketed her phone, trying to ignore the flutter of anxiety and something else. Something dangerous that felt uncomfortably like anticipation. In her stomach. Who's got you smiling like that? Kristen asked, mixing a matcha latte. I'm not smiling. You're definitely smiling. It's weird. You never smile at your phone. It's nothing. It's a guy. Oh my God, you met someone. Kristen's eyes lit up. Tell me everything. There's nothing to tell. Just someone from the restaurant. Customer? Sort of. Hot? Hot? Elena thought about Dante's dark eyes, the precise cut of his jaw, the way he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle worth solving. Very. And he asked you out? Something like that, Kristen squealed, earning looks from customers. Elena Vasquez has a date. Mark this day. This is huge. It's not a date. It's just talking. Talking that required you to wear something nice. That's a date, babe. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Elena couldn't tell anymore where normal, social interaction ended, and whatever game Dante was playing began. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of coffee orders, and Kristen's relentless questions about her mystery man. Elena deflected, changed subjects, focused on work. By 2 p.m., when her shift ended, she was exhausted and wired simultaneously, running on caffeine and nervous energy. She went home, checked on her mother who was watching her telenovelas and seemed stable, then tried to nap. Sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept circling back to tonight, to Dante, to the $400 still in her wallet that felt less like a gift and more like a contract she hadn't agreed to but was somehow bound by anyway. At 5:30, she showered and stood in front of her closet, staring at clothes that were uniformly practical and worn. Nothing nice. Nothing that said dinner with a mafia boss after a shift at an Italian restaurant. Finally, she chose a simple black dress, the one she'd bought for her father's funeral 3 years ago and hadn't worn since. It was modest, hit just below her knees, had sleeves that covered her shoulders. Appropriate for a wake, probably appropriate for whatever this was. She put it in her bag, along with the small amount of makeup she owned. She'd change at Romano's after her shift, in the staff bathroom that smelled like bleach and had a mirror with one corner cracked. The train to work was crowded with evening commuters heading home while she was heading to job number 2. 2 ships passing, she thought. Everyone on their own trajectory, isolated in proximity. Romano's was already busy when she arrived at 5:45. Marco was behind the bar, looking stressed. Thank God you're here, he said. Carlos called in sick. It's just you and Angela tonight. Angela was 17, new, still learning the rhythm of the floor, which meant Elena would be handling the bulk of the tables, which meant she'd be exhausted by 10 p.m. When Dante showed up, expecting her to be ready, for wherever they were going. I've got it, Elena said, tying her apron. Table 4 needs water, 6 wants their check, and booth 9 just sat down. Booth 9. Elena's stomach clenched. She glanced over. Not Dante, just a family with 2 kids arguing over the breadbasket. She exhaled slowly. 7 p.m., he'd said. She had over an hour to prepare herself mentally. The evening shift was relentless. The restaurant filled completely by 6:30, every table occupied, the kitchen backed up, Marco shouting orders, Angela nearly in tears after mixing up 2 tickets. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Elena moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency, taking orders, delivering food, diffusing a complaint about overcooked pasta by comping a dessert, calculating tips in her head while smiling until her face ached. At 6:57, the door opened. Elena felt him before she saw him, the way the energy in the room shifted when Dante Moretti walked in. He was alone this time. No bodyguards, no entourage, just a man in dark jeans and a black sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, walking into a neighborhood Italian restaurant like he belonged there. He did belong there, she reminded herself. He'd grown up in this neighborhood. His family had roots here that went back generations. Marco appeared at her elbow. "I'll take his table." "No," Elena heard herself say. "I've got it." Marco looked at her like she was insane. Maybe she was. Elena grabbed a menu and walked to booth 9, where Dante had seated himself in the same position as last night. Back to the wall, eyes on the door. "Good evening, Mr. Moretti. Welcome back to Romano's." His smile was slight but genuine. "Elena, you're here. I work here. Where else would I be?" "Fair point." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit with me for a minute?" "I'm working." Marco won't mind. He was right. Marco would probably insist she sit if Dante asked. The power dynamics were clear. What Dante wanted, Dante got. But Elena remained, standing. "You said you came to pay your debt." "I did." He pulled out his wallet, extracted $400 bills, and placed them on the table. "For last night's meal, plus 20% tip, which I believe is standard." Elena picked up the money, counted it carefully. $400. The bill had been $378. $22 wasn't 20%, but she wasn't going to argue mathematics with a man who'd already given her $400 last night. "Thank you," she said. "Your debt is settled." "Good. Now sit down, please." The please again. Like it cost him something to ask instead of demand. Elena glanced around. The dinner rush was starting to slow. Angela could handle the few remaining tables, and Marco was watching them with an expression that clearly said, "Don't anger the dangerous man." She slid into the booth, keeping her posture straight, her hands folded in front of her. "Why am I here?" she asked directly. "Because I asked you to be." "That's not an answer." Dante's smile widened. "You don't intimidate easily, do you?" "I'm terrified of you," Elena said honestly. "But fear doesn't stop me from asking questions." "Good. Fear is smart. Fear keeps you alive." He leaned back slightly. "Last night was a test." "I figured that out." "Did you figure out why?" "No." Dante was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes studying her face like he was reading a language only he understood. "I'm looking for someone," he said finally. "Someone with specific qualities. Honesty, discretion, grace under pressure. Someone who treats people with respect regardless of who they are or what they can do for you. And you test for these qualities by pretending your credit card doesn't work? Among other methods." He traced a pattern on the table with one finger, casual but controlled. "You'd be surprised how many people fail. How quickly compassion disappears when there's nothing to gain from it." Elena thought about the businessmen who snapped, their fingers for service, the women who sent back food just to assert dominance, the customers who left pocket change as tips after running servers ragged. Yeah, she could believe most people failed that test. "What happens to the people who pass?" she asked. "That depends on the person." Dante's gaze intensified. "And what they're willing to do." A chill ran down Elena's spine. "I'm not willing to do anything illegal. I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" He pulled out his phone, tapped something, and showed her the screen. It was a photograph of a little girl, maybe 5 years old, with dark curly hair and huge brown eyes. She was laughing at something off camera, her expression pure joy. "This is Sophia," Dante said quietly. "My daughter." Elena's breath caught. She hadn't expected that. Hadn't known Dante Moretti had a child. "She's beautiful. She's everything." His voice carried an emotion Elena hadn't heard from him before. Vulnerability, fear. Her mother died 2 years ago. Cancer. Since then, it's just been Sophia and me, trying to figure out how to be a family when half of us is missing. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Dante pocketed his phone. "Sophia needs stability. Needs someone who can be present, consistent, kind. Someone who sees her as a child first, not as Dante Moretti's daughter, not as leverage or opportunity. Understanding dawned, cold and startling. You're looking for a nanny. I'm looking for someone who can be trusted with the most important person in my world. Someone who won't exploit that position. Someone who passed a test that most people fail. Elena's mind raced. A nanny job. For Dante Moretti's daughter. The pay would be substantial, she was certain. Enough to cover her mother's medical bills, the rent, the crushing weight of expenses that never stopped. But working for Dante meant entering his world. Meant proximity to danger, to violence, to a life she'd spent 27 years staying away from. I'm not qualified, she said. I don't have experience with children. You have experience caring for people who depend on you. Your mother, for instance. Her eyes snapped to his. How do you know about my mother? I know a lot of things, Elena. I know you work 2 jobs to pay her medical bills. I know you're drowning in debt from her surgery. I know you're one emergency away from losing everything. His voice was gentle but firm. I know you need help as much as Sophia needs someone who will care for her genuinely, not just professionally. It should have felt invasive, knowing he'd researched her, dug into her private struggles, and it did feel that way. But it also felt like being seen, truly seen, by someone who understood what it meant to carry impossible weight. What would this job entail? Elena asked carefully. Living in my home, being available for Sophia when I can't be, which is often. Making sure she's safe, happy, educated. Being the stable presence in her life that I try to be but sometimes fail at because my work demands things I can't ignore. Your work being? Various business interests. Illegal business interests. Dante's expression didn't change. I won't lie to you. My family's enterprises exist in gray areas, but Sophia is kept completely separate from that world. She goes to private school, has playdates with normal children, lives as normal a life as I can give her. And you think bringing a stranger into your home is safe? For her? I think bringing someone I vetted carefully, someone who proved their character when they had no reason to, is safer than hiring through conventional channels where people apply because they want access to my money or my organization. Elena wanted to say no, wanted to stand up, finish her shift, go home to her cramped apartment and her sick mother and her 2 jobs that barely kept them afloat. Wanted to stay in her small, difficult, honest life. But $400 had appeared in her wallet last night. $400 that would help but wouldn't solve anything. And Dante was offering something that might actually solve things. Might give her mother the medical care she needed. Might let Elena breathe for the first time in years. I need to think about it, she said. Of course. Take the night. I'll call you tomorrow. And what happens tonight? You said we were going somewhere after my shift. Dante stood, pulled on his jacket. That was before I explained everything. Now that you know what I'm offering, I imagine you need space to think clearly. So go home, Elena. Consider my offer. And call me if you have questions. He started to walk away, then paused. For what it's worth, Sophia would be lucky to have you, and so would I. Then he was gone, leaving Elena sitting in booth 9 with the weight of an impossible decision pressing against her chest. She finished her shift in a daze, cleared tables, processed payments, smiled at customers while her mind spun through scenarios and consequences. By 10:15, when Marco locked the door and told her to go home, Elena had made no progress toward a decision. The train ride home felt longer than usual. She tried to imagine living in Dante Moretti's house, caring for his daughter, existing in proximity to a man who operated outside the law but seemed to genuinely love his child. Tried to imagine the money, the relief of not constantly calculating, not juggling bills like grenades with pulled pins. Tried to imagine the danger, the targets that came with proximity to power, the violence that existed in Dante's world, even if he tried to keep Sophia separate from it. Her mother was still awake when Elena got home, sitting in the living room with a blanket across her lap. Mija, we need to talk. Elena's stomach dropped. Those words were never followed by good news. What's wrong? I got a call from the hospital today. The payment plan. We're 3 months behind. They're threatening to send it to collections. 3 months. Elena had been juggling, paying what she could when she could, hoping it would be enough. Apparently it wasn't. How much do we owe? $11,400. The number hit like a physical blow. $11,000. She'd been chipping away at the debt, thought she'd made progress, but with interest and fees, the mountain had only grown taller. I'll figure it out, Elena said, the automatic response that meant nothing and everything. How? Her mother's voice cracked. You're working yourself to death already. There's no more to give, Elena. Then I'll find more. No. Maria reached out, took Elena's hand. No, mija. This is my debt. My illness. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your whole life for me. You're my mother. What else would I do? You'd live. You'd meet someone, fall in love, have a family. You'd have the life you deserve, not this endless struggle. Elena knelt beside her mother's chair, rested her head against Maria's knee like she had as a child. You are my family. They sat like that for a long time, two women holding each other against the weight of a world that kept taking and taking until there was nothing left but love and stubborn refusal to give up. Finally, Elena stood. I might have a solution. A job offer. It pays well, enough to cover everything. What kind of job? Childcare. For a wealthy family. It wasn't a lie, just not the complete truth. That sounds wonderful, mija. You're good with children. You should take it. Elena kissed her mother's forehead. I'll think about it. Get some rest. In her bedroom, Elena pulled out her phone and stared at Dante's last message. One text. That's all it would take to change everything. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard. She thought about Sophia's laughing face in that photograph, thought about her mother's medical bills, thought about Dante's dark eyes and the test she'd passed without knowing it mattered. She typed, I have questions. Can we talk tomorrow? His response came within seconds. Absolutely. I'll send a car for you at 2 p.m. We'll have lunch, talk privately. You can meet Sophia if you'd like. Meeting Sophia felt significant, like crossing a line from theoretical to real. But if Elena was going to make this decision, she needed to see the child, understand what she'd be signing up for. Okay, where should the car pick me up? From your apartment. I'll text you the address in the morning to confirm. He already knew where she lived. Of course he did. See you tomorrow. Sleep well, Elena. And thank you for considering this. She set down her phone and stared at the ceiling, knowing sleep would be impossible. Tomorrow, she'd enter Dante Moretti's world completely, would see his home, meet his daughter, make a decision that would alter the trajectory of her life irrevocably. The scared part of her wanted to run. The practical part knew she couldn't afford to, and the small, buried part she didn't want to acknowledge was curious about Dante himself. About the man who tested waitresses and loved his daughter and offered salvation wrapped in danger. That part was the most dangerous of all. The black Mercedes arrived at exactly 2 p.m., idling outside Elena's apartment building like a sleek predator. Lorenzo was driving, the same bodyguard who'd walked her to the subway. He smiled politely when she emerged, opened the back door with practiced courtesy. Miss Vasquez, good to see you again. Elena is fine. Elena, Mr. Moretti is looking forward to speaking with you. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Elena smoothed her dress, the same black one from last night, the only nice thing she owned. She felt underdressed and out of place, a waitress playing pretend in a world she didn't belong to. The drive took 40 minutes, moving from her working-class Brooklyn neighborhood through increasingly affluent areas until they reached a tree-lined street in Brooklyn Heights, where historic brownstones stood like sentinels guarding old money and older secrets. Lorenzo pulled up to a 4-story brownstone with a black iron gate and flowering window boxes that looked professionally maintained. It was beautiful, elegant, the kind of home that appeared in magazine spreads about architectural preservation and historic charm. Mr. Moretti is waiting in the garden, Lorenzo said, opening her door. Elena followed him through the gate, up stone steps, through a massive wooden door with stained glass panels that caught afternoon light and scattered it into rainbows across polished hardwood floors. The interior was stunning. High ceilings, crown molding, art that looked original and expensive, but it wasn't cold or ostentatious. Someone had decorated with warmth, with care. There were photographs on the mantel, books on shelves, a child's drawing held to the refrigerator with magnets. A home, not just a house. Lorenzo led her through a gourmet kitchen and out French doors into a garden that shouldn't have been possible in Brooklyn. Flowering trees, a small fountain, a table set for lunch under a pergola draped with wisteria, and Dante, sitting at the table in jeans and a white button-down, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He stood when he saw her, smiled with what looked like genuine pleasure. Elena, thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me. He pulled out her chair, waited until she sat before taking his own seat. A woman Elena hadn't noticed before appeared from the kitchen carrying plates. This is Rosa, Dante said. She's worked for my family for 30 years. Makes the best food in Brooklyn. Though don't tell Marco I said that. Rosa laughed. a warm sound that filled the garden. "You're too kind, Mr. Dante." "Miss, I hope you're hungry. I made too much, as usual." The food was indeed incredible. Fresh pasta with cherry tomatoes and basil, grilled fish with lemon, salad that tasted like it had been picked that morning, bread still warm from the oven. They ate mostly in comfortable silence, and Elena tried to reconcile the man across from her with everything she knew about Dante Moretti. The reputation, the rumors, the violence that followed his name. Here, in this garden, eating lunch in afternoon sunshine, he seemed almost normal, almost safe. "Tell me about Sophia," Elena said finally. Dante's entire demeanor softened. "She's 5. Started kindergarten this year at a private school in Carroll Gardens. She loves dinosaurs, specifically Triceratops, though she'll argue with you about whether they had feathers or not. The current scientific evidence says yes, but Sophia is skeptical." Elena smiled despite her nerves. "Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. She asks questions I don't know how to answer. About her mother, about why some kids have 2 parents, and she only has 1. About why people look at me differently when we're out in public." "What do you tell her?" "The truth, as much as I can. That her mother was amazing and loved her more than anything. That I love her enough for 2 parents. That some people are scared of things they don't understand. And your work? Does she know?" "She knows I run businesses. Import and export, construction, waste management. She doesn't need to know the rest. Maybe when she's older, if she asks directly, I'll tell her the truth. But for now, she gets to be 5. Gets to believe her father is just a businessman who works too much." Elena heard the pain in his voice. The guilt of a man trying to protect his child from reality, while knowing reality would find her eventually. "Why me?" Elena asked. "Really, you could hire anyone. Professional nannies with credentials, experience, backgrounds in early childhood education. Why test a waitress and offer her this job?" Dante set down his fork, met her eyes directly. "Because everyone I hire through conventional channels either wants something from me or is terrified of me. I need someone who sees Sophia first, my daughter first, not my position or my money or my reputation. You treated me with decency when my card declined. You could have humiliated me, called the police, made a scene. Instead, you gave me grace. That's who I want raising my daughter when I can't be there." "I'm not raising her. You're her father. I'm her father who sometimes has to fly to Chicago for 3 days. Who gets phone calls at 2 a.m. that can't be ignored. Who has men trying to kill him often enough that I need bodyguards at my daughter's school pickup." His voice was raw, honest. "I need help, Elena. Real help. From someone who will love Sophia, not just watch her. Love." He was asking for love. For his daughter to be cared for with genuine affection, not professional detachment. "I don't know if I can do that," Elena said quietly. "Love someone else's child." "I think you can. I think you already love your mother enough to work yourself to death. I think you have more capacity for love than you give yourself credit for." A door slammed inside the house. Small footsteps pounded through the kitchen. A child's voice called out, high and excited. "Daddy! Daddy! Rosa said you were home." And then she appeared. Sophia Moretti, 5 years old, with her father's dark eyes and curly hair pulled into pigtails, wearing a school uniform and carrying a backpack covered in dinosaur patches. She stopped short when she saw Elena, suddenly shy. "Who's that?" "This is Elena," Dante said gently. "She's a friend of mine. Elena, this is my daughter, Sophia." "Hi, Sophia," Elena said softly. "Your dad tells me you're an expert on dinosaurs." Sophia's eyes lit up, shyness forgotten. "Did you know Triceratops means 3-horned face? And they lived in herds, like elephants, and they could run really fast even though they were huge?" "I didn't know that. That's really cool. Do you like dinosaurs?" "I don't know much about them, but I'd love to learn." Sophia turned to her father. "Can Elena stay for a while? I can show her my collection." Dante looked at Elena, eyebrows raised in question. Elena found herself nodding. "I'd like that." Sophia grabbed her hand, pulled her toward the house with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of a child who'd already decided they were friends. Elena let herself be led inside, upstairs lined with family photographs, into a bedroom that was every little girl's dream. Pink walls covered with dinosaur posters, a bookshelf overflowing with picture books and chapter books, a toy box erupting with stuffed animals and action figures, and everywhere, dinosaurs. Plastic ones, plush ones, glow-in-the-dark ones stuck to the ceiling. This one's my favorite, Sophia said, pulling out a battered stuffed triceratops. His name is Rexy, even though he's not a T-Rex. Mommy gave him to me before she got sick. Elena's heart clenched. He looks very loved. He is. Daddy says love makes things stronger, not weaker, even if they look old and worn out. They spent an hour in that room. Sophia showed Elena every dinosaur, told her facts she'd learned, asked Elena about her favorite animals and what she did for work and if she'd ever seen the ocean. And slowly, without meaning to, Elena felt something shift inside her. This child, who'd lost her mother, who lived in a beautiful house that couldn't replace what she'd lost, who loved dinosaurs and asked 1,000 questions, and still slept with a worn stuffed animal her mother had given her. This child needed someone. And maybe, just maybe, Elena needed her too. When they came back downstairs, Dante was on his phone, speaking rapid Italian with someone. He saw them and quickly ended the call. Sorry. Work. It's okay. Sophia climbed onto his lap, comfortable and secure. Elena knows everything about my dinosaurs now. Does she? Well, I still have questions, Elena admitted. But Sophia's a good teacher. Sophia beamed. Can Elena come back tomorrow? Dante looked at Elena. The question in his eyes was clear. Can she? Elena thought about her mother's medical bills, thought about working 2 jobs and still drowning, thought about this little girl who'd already lost so much and deserved stability, kindness, love, thought about the danger, the complications, the risk of entering Dante Moretti's world, and made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Actually, Elena said slowly, your dad offered me a job, to help take care of you. If I said yes, I could be here every day. Sophia's eyes went wide. Really? Really, if that's okay with you. Sophia looked at her father. Daddy, can she? Please? That's up to Elena, Dante said quietly, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. Elena took a breath, jumped. Yes, she said. I'll take the job. Sophia squealed and launched herself at Elena, hugging her with the full-body enthusiasm only children possess. Over Sophia's shoulder, Elena saw Dante's expression. Relief, gratitude, and something deeper she couldn't name. Something that looked dangerously like hope. And as Elena hugged Sophia back, feeling the small, warm weight of this child in her arms, she realized she'd just agreed to more than a job. She'd agreed to become part of a family. A complicated, dangerous, beautiful family that needed her as much as she needed them. Tomorrow, her life would change completely. Tomorrow, she'd move into this brownstone, leave her cramped apartment and her struggling existence behind. Tomorrow, everything would be different. But for now, in this moment, holding a 5-year-old who smelled like school and sunshine, Elena let herself feel something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, even if it was temporary. Even if danger lurked at the edges of this beautiful garden and this beautiful home. For now, she had peace, and that was enough. Elena moved into the brownstone 3 days later, with 2 suitcases containing everything she owned that mattered. Her mother had cried, insisted Elena was making a mistake, then cried again when Elena handed her a check for $15,000, enough to clear the hospital debt with money left over for medications and physical therapy. Where did you get this? Maria had asked, hands shaking as she held the check. An advance on my salary. The family is very generous. Another partial truth. Dante had transferred $50,000 into an account he'd opened in her name. For emergencies, he'd said. For anything you or your mother needs. The gesture had felt too large, too generous, until he'd explained that Sophia's safety was priceless, and anyone protecting his daughter deserved security of their own. Now Elena stood in her new bedroom on the 3rd floor of the brownstone, unpacking clothes into a closet that was bigger than her old bedroom. The room had its own bathroom with a clawfoot tub and heated floors. The bed was king-sized with sheets that felt like clouds. There was a desk by the window overlooking the garden, a reading chair, built-in bookshelves waiting to be filled. It was too much. All of it was too much. Do you like it? Elena turned to find Dante in the doorway, hands in his pockets, expression uncertain in a way she hadn't seen before. Like her opinion actually mattered. It's beautiful, more than I expected. Rosa picked out the bedding. She said every woman deserves a comfortable place to sleep. He stepped into the room, gestured to the empty bookshelves. I didn't know what you like to read, so I left them empty. But there's a bookstore 2 blocks away. Sophia and I go sometimes on Saturdays. You could come with us. The casual invitation to family routine made Elena's chest tighten. She'd agreed to care for his daughter, but somehow, Without discussing it explicitly, she'd also agreed to become part of their lives in ways that went beyond professional. I'd like that. Good. Dante moved to the window, looked out at the garden where Sophia was playing with Rosa, chasing butterflies between flower beds. There are rules we need to discuss. Protocols for Sophia's safety. And just like that, the danger she'd been trying not to think about pushed its way back to the surface. Tell me. Lorenzo drives Sophia to and from school. Always. If I'm not available, you go with him. Never alone, never without security. His voice was matter of fact, like he was discussing grocery shopping instead of kidnapping threats. The school knows the approved pickup list. Anyone not on that list tries to take Sophia. The school calls me immediately and goes into lockdown. Has someone tried? No, but preparation prevents tragedy. He turned to face her. When we're out in public, you stay aware. Watch for people paying too much attention, cars following us, anything that feels wrong. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. You make it sound like we're at war. We're always at war, Elena. Some days it's just quieter than others. The honesty was brutal and somehow reassuring. At least he wasn't pretending the danger didn't exist. What about inside the house? This brownstone has security that would make the Secret Service jealous. Cameras, alarms, reinforced doors and windows. Rosa lives in the basement apartment. Lorenzo lives in the carriage house out back. You're never truly alone here. He paused. That's for your safety as much as Sophia's. Am I in danger? Anyone close to me is in danger. That's the reality of my life. His jaw tightened. If I could change it, I would. But I can't. So instead, I make sure the people I care about are protected. The people I care about. He'd included her in that category without hesitation. I can handle it, Elena said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. I know you can. That's why you're here. That evening, Elena cooked dinner for the first time in the brownstone kitchen. Nothing fancy, just pasta, with homemade sauce, garlic bread, salad, the kind of meal her mother used to make when money was tight but love was abundant. Sophia helped, standing on a step stool to stir the sauce, chattering about her day at school. Dante sat at the kitchen island, laptop open but mostly watching them, a slight smile on his face that made him look years younger. Daddy, Elena says when I'm older she'll teach me to make empanadas like her abuela used to make. Is that right? If you want, Elena said, testing the pasta for doneness. My grandmother's recipe. My mother still makes them sometimes, when her hands aren't too stiff. I'd like that, Dante said quietly. Family recipes should be passed down. They ate together at the kitchen table, not the formal dining room. Sophia told elaborate stories about recess drama involving a boy named Marcus who kept stealing kickballs. Dante listened with the focused attention of someone who genuinely cared about 5-year-old social politics. Elena watched them together and saw the love. Saw how Dante's entire being softened around his daughter. Saw how Sophia felt completely safe with him, despite his reputation, despite the darkness that followed his name. After dinner, Sophia had a bath while Elena cleaned the kitchen. Dante helped, drying dishes while she washed, moving around each other in domestic choreography that felt surprisingly natural. She likes you, Dante said, setting a plate in the rack. Sophia doesn't warm up to people easily, but with you, it was immediate. She's easy to like. She's everything good about her mother and nothing of my world. I want to keep it that way. You're afraid she'll find out what you do, who you really are. I'm afraid she'll look at me differently when she knows. Fear instead of love. He set down the towel, turned to face her. That's the worst part of this life, Elena. Not the violence or the danger. It's knowing that the people you love most will eventually see you for what you are. And what are you? A man who does terrible things for reasons that used to make sense. His voice was raw, stripped of pretense. My father built an empire on fear. I inherited it at 23 and spent the next decade trying to make it less monstrous. Cleaner operations, fewer civilian casualties, rules that actually mean something. But clean organized crime is still crime. I'm still the monster, just better dressed. Elena dried her hands, stepped closer to him. Close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried that had nothing to do with physical strength. You're also a man who loves his daughter enough to let a stranger into his home because he wants her to be cared for with kindness. That's not nothing. It's not enough. Maybe not. But it's something. They stood there in the kitchen, the space between them charged with things neither was ready to name. Then Sophia's voice called from upstairs. Elena, I'm ready for my story. The moment broke. Dante stepped back, the vulnerability shuddering behind his usual control. She'll want 3 books. She always does. Don't let her con you into 4, noted. Elena went upstairs to find Sophia in dinosaur pajamas, teeth brushed. Rexy the Triceratops already tucked into bed beside her. The bedtime routine was simple, comfortable, and by the time Elena finished the 3rd book, Sophia was half asleep. Elena? Sophia's voice was drowsy, small. Yeah, sweetie? I'm glad you're here. It feels like having a mommy again. Elena's throat tightened. She smoothed Sophia's curls back from her forehead, pressed a kiss there. I'm glad I'm here too. Sleep well, Sophia. Night-night. Elena turned off the light, left the door cracked open the way Sophia liked, and stood in the hallway trying to process the enormity of what she'd just heard. It feels like having a mommy again. She'd been here 3 days. 3 days. And already this child had attached, had hoped, had started rebuilding something broken. The weight of that trust was staggering. Elena found Dante in his study on the 2nd floor, door open, working through papers that looked suspiciously like legitimate business documents. Import manifests, construction permits, payroll spreadsheets, the legal face of illegal operations. She's asleep, Elena said from the doorway. Thank you. He set down his pen. Elena, what Sophia said earlier, about you feeling like having a mother again. I want you to know there's no pressure to be anything more than what you agreed to. You're her caregiver, not her replacement parent. I know, but I don't think Sophia sees the distinction. She's 5. Everything is simple at 5. He ran a hand through his hair. If this is too much, if you want to adjust the arrangement, I don't. The words came out more forcefully than intended. I'm not backing out, Dante. I made a commitment. To you, and to her. Even though it's complicated, especially because it's complicated. Nothing worth doing is simple. He studied her for a long moment, then smiled. Actually smiled, warm and genuine. You're remarkable, you know that. I'm terrified and making this up as I go. That's what makes you remarkable. Elena left him to his work and went to her beautiful bedroom with its 2 comfortable bed and tried to tint him sleep. But her mind wouldn't quiet. She kept thinking about Sophia's words, about Dante's vulnerability in the kitchen, about the way this family had wrapped around her heart in less than a week. She'd thought taking this job was about money, about survival, about giving her mother a chance at health. But lying there in the dark, Elena realized it had become something more, something terrifying and wonderful and impossible to walk away from. She'd fallen into Dante Moretti's world expecting danger and darkness. What she'd found instead was a broken family trying to heal, a little girl who needed love, and a man who carried the weight of impossible choices with the kind of strength that came from surviving what should have destroyed him. Tomorrow, she'd wake up and care for Sophia. She'd make breakfast, walk to school with Lorenzo, providing security, come home and try to create normalcy in a house where violence waited just outside the door. Tomorrow, she'd keep pretending this was just a job. But tonight, alone in the dark, Elena admitted the truth she'd been avoiding. This wasn't just a job anymore. This was becoming her life, her family, her home, and God help her. But she didn't want to leave, even knowing the danger, even knowing the cost. She wanted to stay. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.